Okay, everyone, let's see if we can change some minds tonight. Tonight we're talking about basic income, and we're going to start off with Alexandria, Virginia. With a population of about 160,000 people and a poverty rate of 8.6%, or 1 in 12 people living in poverty, the city of Alexandria has decided to launch a guaranteed basic income pilot.
I mean, that's really cool because I know you're going to jump into some of it, but this is kind of one of the things, like, just like that. I mean, my first thought when I hear pilot is just thinking about the lost opportunity of Yang in New York. That's the first thing I think of, man, because that would have been like the perfect pilot. This is what you do need. Like, I don't want to go too much into it because I know I was kind of scanning. There's some more things we'll dive into, like examples. But the reality is, like, you're not going to probably ever get like an all-encompassing bill like at the national level. So the reality is you need to see it kind of at the local level, maybe the state level, for example. And then, like, once people can kind of see it works, right? Because we know it works. There's examples. But, you know, people seeing is really fucking believing in this country. This gives us that hard data we really are going to need.
Basically, where Alexandria got their money was federal funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. And the city devised an allocation plan that included a recovery goal of everyone has access to their basic needs. I really like that. I was like, man, that's really forward thinking. So props to them, which includes investing funds to boost early childhood care, housing, food security, and provide a guaranteed income to 150 families. So again, there's 160,000 people, 1 in 12 are living in poverty, and they're able to give it to 150 families, which really means they're giving it to 150 people, like the head of a household is getting it. The allocation plan states that a monthly cash transfer of $500 on a preloaded debit card would be provided to approximately 150 families for 24 months. Participants would be supported through case management to help families establish goals, navigate systems, and fully participate in the pilot. That's a lot of overreach. To me, it should just be like, here's a direct deposit, have at it. That's a lot of big government, if you will. The total cost of the guaranteed basic income pilot is estimated to cost $3 million. The city of Alexandria received $59 million from the American Rescue Plan Act. This is not unlike a similar pilot program that took place recently in Stockton, California. A study in March of those involved in that program showed participants transitioned to full-time jobs and had better health. So, like, we've already had studies that say this is going to have a positive impact.
You can look at fucking Alaska. Like,
and I don't know what it is about the number 150, but it's used in a lot of these small pilots because Los Angeles has a young adult in basic income program that they're doing for over the course of 3 years, and it's also 150 individuals.
It's probably the statistically it's like the statistical threshold for like the city's population to get like a representative sample, probably like for like, is what I'm assuming. That's me shooting from the hip a little bit there, so take it for what it is. I could be wrong about that, but I mean, so if you think about like a survey on tens of thousands of like doctors from like the American Medical Association, they'll have like 300 to 400 people surveyed, right? Yeah, I don't know, but you're right, it is always 150, but that's the only thing I can think of. I can't think of what else it would be. To your point though, so there's how many people in the it was 160,000.
Yeah, so I did the math, man. Math. It's like
14,000 still, like 14,000, 13,700.
It's 1%. It's 1% of the people in poverty that's getting addressed. 1%. Yeah. So
that's funny. Our mind went to the same spot.
yeah. I was going to say, and speaking of the Los Angeles pilot, it is for $1,200 a month because it's like ridiculously expensive to live in Los Angeles, which I've always thought that like the federal universal basic income is like going to just be amazing in like certain parts of the country, just like the most economic boost. And in other places, it's just going to kind of make things a little less harder, which is why I think you have to advocate for, you need both a federal universal basic income, but then you also need these pilots to exist even afterwards, because it's a different living expense all over.
It's the same thing I always had an issue with like the minimum wage conversation. Not like I don't think we should raise minimum wage, right? But it's just like, bro, like $25 in California goes a lot different than $25 in, Tennessee. There's some advantages, right, to having states and local cities that can make decisions and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know what that would necessarily look like. Maybe like a federal like UBI program, but then maybe like states have like more like direct support and stuff like that for the things not addressed, because they can, like, I don't know.
Or even cities. or even just cities like Los Angeles and New York City, like I would assume they would have to have, or Dallas or Austin or Seattle, like they're too large of entities that they would have to have their own, and they're expensive places to live. So they'd have to have their own additional basic income because there's not going to be that magic number.
Also, I go kind of back and forth a little bit. Like on one hand, I do like the idea of making sure like there's resources and things that kind of help guide people. But to your point, it seems like a little like over the top. Like, like most people, it's like the conversation was go back to when it comes to like social programs and stuff. It's like most people probably know what they need more than you do in like their like day-to-day life. So get the fuck out their way and give them the ability to do so.
Yeah, it's so that they can see how people spend it. It's they already have things like this that exist, like cash benefits that are tied in with food stamps. And so it's basically like if you don't spend it, we'll take it back because you never actually have access of it. It's in a bank account that the government controls.
The prepaid debit card.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I think that it's potential you could find a loophole. Like if you just ask for cash back and then you take your full amount out, I think you could potentially, but if they remove the cash back factor, yeah, it's basically because they want to figure out every transaction you spent the money on.
Like in fairness, like that's why this is a 150 family rollout. It is, I think, more about data, right? Like that's literally what it is. But like, still, to your point, like it is kind of against the ultimate goal, in my opinion, and I think definitely your opinion, and I think people really support the movement's opinion. So, but these are, I would say, minor-ish to decent criticisms compared to the overall story here. This is still a positive, obviously, big positive.
Yeah, and I hate to use this phrase, and I hope it's not, because everything in my generation just turns out to be like not PC anymore. But beggars can't be choosers, and I feel like that's what's happening with the income pilots. Is like you have to just be grateful that the city even thought to allocate $3 million for something like an income pilot.
I mean, I think of like beggars can't be choosers, right? So like you got yourself into that bummy position, right? So you don't get, and it's like, yeah, it's not like anti-PC, but it sure is a capitalist
Yeah.
slap on the ass.
Yeah, there you go. And so speaking of basic income, I'm going to do a quick shout out to the Support Act that you and I actually were going to go in depth in, but then Mia and Boyce already did. And so I figured why not just send people over to there if they want to get all the details on it. And instead, we can just highlight the fact that you should support it and that you can easily write your Congress people and let them know that they should support it because it's going to be the closest thing. It's not going to be universal by any means, but it's closer to a federal basic income. And like that's the ultimate goal versus just all these little pilots popping up in various cities that have mayors or city councils at the time that like recognize the value of a basic income. And speaking of income movement, Boyce is supposed to have one of the co-founders on soon. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that interview.
I won't be missing that interview.
Yeah. And then at this point, it would just be weird if we, oh, that's right. They also have a basic income march coming up.
I was looking into this real quick, by the way, so you can see the locales right there. And so I'm like in Sacramento area, right? So like I was thinking Reno, maybe LA, but you can, if you have the means, like, you know how to, like, you have some, like, I don't have experience with this kind of thing, but like you can sign up your city for like a location and go through that process and see what that looks like. So like if you're in, I don't know, just taking a quick look, Arizona, for example, maybe, right? And you don't feel like driving to, lower Nevada or out to LA, maybe start something in Phoenix, right? Or, something like that if you have the means to.
But yeah, it's growing. There's even one in Canada. So I think that's positive. I think marches are a positive thing for awareness. And it's I think it's encouraging that there's so many marches. And hopefully we've dealt with the variants and the mutations and all that like none of these have to get canceled. But I was trying to say before, I forgot about the shouting out the basic income march that is September 25th, which sounds like a long ways away, but it's really just right around the corner, is crowdfund basic income, which is the thing I always have in my background. And I've given the spiel a bajillion times, so I'm not going to give it again. People can always feel free to ask me if they have any questions. Sharon Information was asking me in my live today. I love that people just are like, hey, I've got a question, and I just do the best I can. And No Use for Names was asking as well. So crowdfundbasicincome.org is a way to start the process of crowdfunding as a collective basic incomes for individuals, some of which are living in abject poverty and some of which don't have the timeline to wait for all these studies.
I 100,000% support crowdfund basic income, guys. Like, it's disappointing that people in our circle don't support it as much as they should, because on the micro, this is exactly what we're talking about. On the macro, so there's good people on that list, man. Like that, they're all. And here's the thing: it's not even about that. It's about, like, again, the same idea we talk about every time. Every single human being deserves to live a life of dignity. This shouldn't be based upon random fucking happenstance or chance. So,
yeah, and it's you got to be careful worrying too much about like how low someone's income bracket is, because it's dehumanizing to have to disclose that, and two, it shouldn't matter. Like a lot of the factors we bring in to like whether or not I'm just going to be honest with you for a second, Matt. Some of the trashiest people I know are in higher income brackets, and some of the classiest people I know are in lower income brackets. And like to think that it's always the opposite or just one, I think it's just us falling for propaganda. So
I'll go one step further too. That 100%. I'll say that some of the most generous people I know are lower class, lower socioeconomic, and some of the stingiest, most I don't give a fuck motherfuckers have more than enough to give. They just don't want to ever.
yes.
So,
Yeah, that is a common theme. And speaking of giving, I'm just gonna recap of something that happened recently. Was we had like a recent charity event that was essentially put on by Change the System and No Use for Names as they raced to 10K. And it, as of right now, has raised over $1,300 for crowdfund basic income. And I'm waiting to add a few more people to the list so that when I distribute the money evenly across everyone, because it should be universal how I distribute the money across everyone. And I just think it'll be more impactful that we have more names on there. And there's a few people that have pledged that I haven't yet received that. So I'm like, oh, that way it gets, so that my point here is, again, subscribe, because I will keep people updated with any future crowdfunding events we do for crowdfund basic income. And just because people have been taking an interest in like, oh, I'd rather, just give it to you and let you disperse it. I think I have to turn this sucker into a nonprofit, Matt. So that's going to be an exciting journey that I'll probably let people in on.
This is a good ass idea. Like, there's nothing more that needs to be said. It's a good ass idea. She lays it out for you. She makes it very clear she's more than happy to answer your questions. And like, so I mean, I don't know what more people need. If you want to help someone and you don't know where to help, here's an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, and so to that point, if you have any questions right now, you can, if you're watching live, leave them in the chat, or you can leave them as a comment, and I'll check them out later when Boyce publishes that. But if you were kind of skeptical about anything with basic income during this segment, hopefully we changed your mind.